So I was contacted by the BookFest committee, and obviously not used to microphones. And they said that, you know, Jim was going to provide a wood engraving for this, and they wanted us to, you know, work in collaboration and produce this Hemingway piece. And initially, it was their first selection was quite a bit bigger poem, and I can't remember the name of that one now. But I'm glad they went with Along with Youth. It's a beautiful piece, and Jim did an excellent job interpreting it, I thought. But Jim and I have known each other for quite a few years now, but I don't think we've ever worked on a project yet together. So this was a lot of fun, all by itself. So then we just started asking each other, well, what do you want to do? And I'm like, well, I don't know. So Jim, I was like, yeah, well, why don't we just, you're going to do the illustration, why don't you do it in whatever format you want to proceed with, and then we'll just sort of go with that, rather than me specifying, you know, you've got 6 by 8 inches to work with, and I want you to do this in that space, and it's going to appear here on the broadside. So, you know, real work in earnest designing this thing didn't really begin until I saw some of the first proofs of Jim's engraving block that he sent up. And then I started playing with paper sizes and paper selection, and just, you know, one of the challenges for me personally was, well, how do I take this beautiful round wood engraving and incorporate it into a rectilinear, you know, format. Primarily we print books, so I guess it just sort of naturally, my tendencies went towards, you know, like a double title page spread almost, and it could almost be a book layout the way it is. It's all handset type, original real foundry type. Garamond for the poem and the display text, and then some Bernard booklet, something for the disclaimer line that I tried to print as light as possible. Then they told me I had to do it on the front. If I had my way, I'd have done it on the back and just left it totally uncluttered. But because of copyright and that sort of thing, we had to do it on the front. And I guess Jim and I got credit that way too. So, but pretty much it just sort of came together with a series of trials and errors, and really not. It was a lot of fun, and beyond that, I think it's a very important piece. I live almost 5 hours north of here, and pretty much in Hemingway country. Horton Bay, and where his Nick Adams stories came from, are just 40 minutes north of me. So I get a lot of Hemingway interactions up there, and there's been quite a few books published in that area, and with big photo books around the Petoskey area. So doing a Hemingway thing, was inevitable, I suppose, and I'm really happy that I got to do it with these guys. We've actually got a junky copy of the broadside that I'd be happy to pass around so everybody can get a close look at it if they'd like. And hold the mic closer. And,
the wind is whistling.
So basically, I just, is there any questions that anybody else might have regarding this?
What do you mean by hand set? Are you talking about the old letter?
Yeah, this is all letterpress printed, so it's one letter at a time coming out of a type case. Setting the title on the curve was done with angular quads. And
what's the advantage of doing that as opposed to offset?
Well, my main argument for handset type is that the original designers, whether it would have been Fred Gowdy for his own faces or these revival versions of Garamond in this case is that many of them were like designed each size. The type designer would, as opposed to a computer font that you might have nowadays where you just highlight it and select it and hit that number if it's going to be 12-point text or 72-point display line. It's taking that same letter and it's a mathematical algorithm that it resizes it. So if you look at it, a 12-point capital M next to a 72-point, they'll look pretty much the same. But that doesn't work. That's not effective. The original type designers would redesign that typeface for like every 2 to 3 sizes up so that they would be more harmonious. The color of the type on the page is more even, and that the serif structure and the line structure for each of those letter forms would be much more conducive to that size. And so overall, when combined on the page, the color, what we talk about, is the ink on the face that's transferred to the sheet of the paper. And with modern process printing, it's pretty much all digital composition, and you can tweak it to some degree, but for me personally, using handset type is, I have the ultimate control. I can insert this tiny thin copper space or brass space between letters to space things out. It was quite a trick to do these arcs, where it would have been infinitely easier, on a computer. But that's part of the fun of it as well. It's the challenge that I look forward to doing.
How did you have to decide on using Garamond?
Well, it's a typeface that I have a fair amount of. Which, I would have, we have book faces primarily, so, for me it was narrowing it down between Bernard Modern and Garamond or Baskerville. And Garamond, I think, has the most dignified face, and it had a slightly narrower set to it than the Baskerville, so it worked better for this composition. That, and when I asked Jim if he would mind printing the wood engraving in this umber ink, it would be pretty harmonious color-wise to the image. So when I'm matching images and text, that's another thing that I'm looking for, is like, how to best match line weights and making it look good.
Where does the word broadside come from?
Well, I think it's dates, I think the earliest known from like the 1700s, and a broadside is a sheet of paper that's printed just on one side. A broadsheet would be two-sided printing, but this was ultimately akin to the posters that you see on the telephone poles around here, only much classier back in those days because it was nice handmade paper. So it would have been an early advertising scheme, basically.
So are the versions of Garamond and Bernard that you have, are they ones that would have been available when Hemingway wrote this poem?
Yes.
Because you have those pretty ligatures, those ST
Right.
ligatures that would have been typical.
Yes.
So are these really old typefaces that you've got? I mean, are they...
Yeah, well, the definitely the Bernard booklet that I did the credit line with is, I use that specifically because it's a typeface that has not been turned into a digital typeface. The Bernard Modern has, but the precursor to it is Bernard booklet, which had 13 characters that were redesigned by Lucien and then re-released by the American Type Founders Company as Bernard Modern. And that's pretty popular computer face now, but since I have the precursor version, which dates to I think 1906, it was something I could put on there and it would be like, well, this is definitely handset because it's
not available, and would have been more in the time, more consistent with the time.
Yeah, I mean, the newer version was really re-released in the teens. But, and of course, this version of Garamond has been around, I think, was it Morris that
Probably in the
Yeah.
20s or 30s.
Yeah, in the early 20s, designed this version of Garraman. And so, but actually some of the type that I have from my Garraman collection came from the last remaining type foundry in the country, and Theo Rahek and the Dale Guild out in New Jersey. So, anybody else have any questions regarding the types or?
What's the paper?
Ah, the paper, much to Jim's chagrin, is Hemingway Biblio. It's a mold-made, 100% cotton sheet, made in Germany, a felt surface. So it's probably, in retrospect, not the best paper because it was. I'm currently working on a new project where we're using this paper as well, and I've printed a previous book on it and had forgotten just how little surface sizing was in the paper. So it's a little more difficult surface to work with because it's very fibrous, being 100% cotton and very little like a glue sizing on the surface. That you have to modify the ink very specifically so that it's not too tacky when it's going down on the sheet, that it actually lifts paper fibers off from the sheet. So I dampened these just slightly before printing to both aid in the ink release and to give a nicer impression. So it's a very nice stock.
How many times through the press do you run this?
Well, we did 125 in the edition, plus maybe 10 more for spoilage.
Yeah, no, I mean a single thing, a single sheet. How many times do you go through 120?
4 times. Each color is a separate press run.
Okay.
So Jim printed his wood engraving himself.
Oh, okay.
So we split that, and then so then I had the press run for the iron red, the black for the text, and the light gray for the credit line.
Okay.
So yeah, each one went through at least 4 times.
So his printing then was on a different type of press altogether from the existing block? Or?
Yeah, I think you used a cylinder press as well.
Cylinder press.
Yeah. So we were both using the same style of press, but 500 miles apart. And any more questions about this end of it before I turn things over to?
When you do a collaboration like that, how do you deal with layout? Just a lot of phone calls?
Well, that was left pretty much up to me to like design the thing.
Okay,
So.
but then he printed after you, right?
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Ultimately.
So it was up to him.
Yeah. No, I specified to him exactly where on the sheet that I would like this placed. Because I was hoping to sort of match up the arcs here. So I had a specific place in mind, and when you're printing, you've got one edge of your sheet that goes against the grippers that feed it into the press, and you've got another edge that feeds against a side guide. So as long as I could specify to Jim where on the sheet I wanted it and which 2 edges to use as a guide, then we were pretty. And Jim's a professional.
And so he put it where he wanted it.
Yeah. It's a half a point over.
One question about the copyright, going back to that. Did they have to approve the design layout